All right, let's get right into it. We're going to be talking all about the massive fight for power in 19th century Britain. And look, forget what you think you know from dusty textbooks. This is a story packed with riots, the threat of revolution, and how everyday people completely flipped the script on who runs the country. This stuff is absolutely core to your GCSE history course, so let's dive in.
Just stop and think about that for a second. What if you had absolutely no say in the big decisions affecting your life? No vote, no voice. It sounds kind of crazy to us now, but 200 years ago, that was the reality for almost everyone in Britain. And you know what? We're still debating who gets a say today. Things like, should 16-year-olds get the vote? This fight for a voice, it never really stops.
Okay, here's the key term you need to nail for your exam: the franchise. It sounds fancy, but all it means is the right to vote. And back then, let me tell you, it was the most exclusive club you can imagine. To get in, you had to be rich, you had to be a man, and you had to own land. That was pretty much it. Everybody else, and we're talking the vast majority of the country, was left completely out in the cold.
And if you want to know just how broken the system was, get a load of this. On one side, you got these places called rotten boroughs. Take Old Sarum. It was basically just a hill. Hardly anyone lived there, but it still sent 2 MPs to Parliament. 2! And then, on the other side, you've got a massive, booming industrial city like Birmingham, with hundreds of thousands of people. And how many MPs did it have? A big fat 0. The system wasn't just unfair, it was completely ridiculous.
100,000. Just let that number sink in. That's how many people gathered in a field in Manchester back in 1819. And they weren't there to cause trouble. This was a peaceful crowd, men, women, even children, who just wanted to hear speeches about one simple idea: fixing this broken system and getting the right to vote.
But the people in charge, well, they panicked. They didn't see citizens asking for their rights. They saw a mob, a threat to their power. The local magistrates made a truly terrible decision. They called in the cavalry. We're talking armed soldiers on horseback, and ordered them to charge right into that peaceful, unarmed crowd. The result was a total bloodbath, which became known as the Peterloo Massacre. At least 11 people were killed, and hundreds were horrifically injured. So what did the government do? Did they investigate the magistrates who gave the order? No way. Instead, they arrested the protest leaders and charged them with treason. Then they passed the 6 Acts to make it illegal for people to even meet in large groups. The message was loud and clear: shut up, or we will shut you up for good. But here's the thing about people. They didn't shut up. If anything, Peterloo proved that just asking politely was never going to work. It lit a fire under people. It created this new determination. If the government wasn't going to give them power, well, they were just going to have to take it. This was the real beginning of an organized fight for the vote.
And the pressure really started to build. You had groups like the Birmingham Political Union getting incredibly organized, creating huge petitions, even staging tax strikes. But when the House of Lords tried to block reform in 1831, the whole country just exploded. There were riots everywhere, and the government got genuinely terrified of a full-blown French-style revolution. They knew they had to do something. So they passed the Great Reform Act of 1832. What did it actually do? Well, it was a pretty big deal. It got rid of 56 of the worst rotten boroughs, it finally gave MPs to cities like Birmingham, and it did expand the vote to more people. Basically, middle-class men who owned or rented a decent amount of property. It was the first real crack in that old, corrupt wall.
But, and this is a massive but you have to remember for your exams, the crucial point is who was still left out. The new voters? They were middle-class guys like shopkeepers. The vast majority of working-class men? Still no vote. And get this, voting still wasn't secret. That meant your landlord or your boss could literally stand over you and watch who you voted for. The fight was a long, long way from being over.
And that, of course, led to the next massive movement, Chartism. The Chartists looked at the Great Reform Act and basically said, nope, not good enough. Their People's Charter had 6 key demands for what a truly democratic country should look like. Things like a vote for every man, a secret ballot so you couldn't be bullied, and, this one was really radical, paying MPs. Why was that so important? Well, if MPs weren't paid, only rich men could afford to do the job. Paying them meant ordinary working guys could finally have a seat at the table.
Okay, here is a fantastic analysis point for any essay you write. In the short term, Chartism looked like a complete and utter failure. Parliament laughed at their petitions, their leaders were arrested, it seemed like they'd lost. But in the long term, wow, it was a staggering success. 5 of their 6 radical demands eventually became the law of the land.
They might have lost the battles at the time, but they absolutely won the war for Britain's future.
So, we've talked a lot about votes, but power isn't just about who you tick on a ballot paper, is it? For most people, the fight for power was about day-to-day survival. It was a fight for the absolute basics, like having enough food to eat and, not being killed or maimed at your job.
What's really interesting is how different campaigns started using a similar playbook to get things done. Take two of the biggest movements of the time, the abolitionists fighting to end slavery and the Anti-Corn Law League, who were fighting against laws that made bread super expensive. Both had brilliant, inspiring leaders. Both had a strong moral cause. Both used peaceful methods like pamphlets and petitions to win over the public. And both were up against powerful MPs who were personally profiting from the very things they were trying to stop.
At the same time, you had reformers like Lord Shaftesbury, who looked at what was happening to children in the new factories and mines and were just horrified. They campaigned tirelessly, and piece by piece, they started winning vital new laws to protect people. The 1833 Factory Act, which banned kids under 9 from working in textile mills, was a huge moment. These acts were basically the first time the government ever said, okay, we actually have a responsibility to protect vulnerable people from being exploited. That was a massive shift.
So, individuals could definitely make a difference. But the final, crucial piece of this whole puzzle, that was when working people realized the incredible power they had when they all stood together, when they organized, when they formed unions.
The white slaves of London. That is how a journalist named Annie Besant described the young women working at the Bryant and May match factory. They were working with this incredibly dangerous chemical, white phosphorus, for almost no money. It caused a horrific disease called phossy jaw that would literally make their jawbones rot away. Calling them slaves was designed to shock people, to make them pay attention. And you know what? It worked.
Fired up by Besant's article, these young women, who everyone had ignored, did something incredible. They walked out on strike. And because of the media coverage, they got massive public support. Crucially, they got organized and formed their own union. And against all the odds, they won. The factory owners caved and gave them everything they asked for. And this is the key point. It was the very first time a strike by so-called unskilled workers had ever actually succeeded. It sent shockwaves across the whole country.
That victory was like lighting a match in a fireworks factory. It just sparked an explosion. The next year, the London dock workers went on a massive, successful strike. Suddenly, unskilled workers everywhere were thinking, hey, if the match girls can do it, so can we. And look at the chart. Union membership just skyrocketed, hitting over 2 million by the end of the century. That whisper was turning into a roar.
And this brings us to our final, vital connection. This huge, powerful, organized movement of working people, they needed a voice in Parliament. The other parties, the Liberals and Conservatives, just weren't listening. So the unions decided to create their own party, the Labour Party. And for the very first time in British history, the working class had a political party that was built by them, for them. The journey was complete.
So there you have it, a whole century of struggle. It took petitions, it took riots, it took strikes. But through it all, ordinary people completely changed the balance of power in Britain. They won the right to vote, the right to a safer life, and the right to have their own voice in politics. Which kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the big fights for power and fairness about today? And what do you think they'll be about in the century to come?